Trump and 18 allies charged in Fulton County grand jury indictment.
Mm-hmm.
But the charges that you see presented by Fani Willis down in Georgia, as we talked about on previous shows, and we talked about how does this affect Black people, and what will Donald Trump's move be with these current charges. As I was talking to Baba Makaru over text, he was just educating me on the fact that Donald Trump will not be able to pardon himself out of these charges in Georgia if he was to be elected president. So I know you've been following this, Baba Makaru, and everybody's talking about it. So give us your insight on what you see happening here.
Santi Sana, brother Amos. Our focus is really on how does this impact African people globally and the African American body politic. And we've been saying for months now that the case that the Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis was preparing was perhaps the one that would be the most devastating to Donald Trump in terms of the possibility of being convicted. And we anticipated that Willis, as we've said on this shows many times, being a fan of Georgia's RICO law, the racketeering, influence, and corrupt organizations law. We knew that she would be using this particular law sort of as a wide snare or wide net to convict Donald Trump. And sure enough, there are 19 people have been indicted, Donald Trump and 18 of his cohorts, including Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, and others have all been indicted, including some lower level people. Now, the Georgia RICO law, person is convicted, could serve up to 20 years. And so, this I think is the hammer that Willis will be using to get some of Donald Trump's underlings to give him up. 18 people remaining silent is not a case like the Clintons faced, back in the 1990s, with the savings and loan issue, where Susan McDougal was a trooper. Unlike the people that gave up Michael Vick and the people that gave up Orenthal James Simpson, Susan McDougal would not talk. She was given all kinds. They dangled all kind of plums in front of her, but she chose to go to jail rather than to give the Clintons up. How many of Donald Trump's cohorts are willing to do that, to face time in jail? Of course, now Susan McDougal wasn't facing RICO charges, and she was released for prison. I can't remember how many years she served, but these guys are looking at some serious time. And none of these guys are spring chickens, as we say, down here in the Carolinas. So it's going to be very interesting the way she has structured these indictments. Now, we have been saying, ever since the Alvin Bragg indictments, I think 34 indictments in New York City involving an adult movie star, hush money, that type of thing, that the face of the prosecution of Donald Trump is Black. It is 4/5 Black, with Alvin Bragg, Letitia James, now the judge, Tanya Chutkin, the D.C. Federal judge, and of course the D.A. Fani T. Willis, and the lone paleface, so to speak, is Jack Smith. So when we talk about optics, and optics are clearly very important in terms of influencing people and moving people into action, when Donald Trump's supporters, or some people might call them the MAGA fanatics or whatever you want to call them, I wouldn't use the language that Hillary Clinton used, but when they look at this, they are going to see people of African descent. And the question for us becomes, how do they react? Now, we have, of course, within the white supremacy dynamic, first of all, operating at the institutional level where it's most devastating, even though they would like to keep the attention folks focused on the raw elements or the organized raw elements, which have been historically represented by organizations like the Ku Klux Klan, for example. It depends on exactly how which particular element reacts. Okay, because if it's the people that went into the Capitol building, I would call that perhaps a junior varsity, not the serious people, not the guys, for example, the ex-military veterans, guys who served in Afghanistan and Iraq, for example, the guys that are out training in the backwoods of Georgia and Michigan, who probably have military grade weapons, since the Department of Defense does a piss poor job of keeping track of all of the weapons and the money that they are continuously funneled by the military industrial congressional complex. I would call these guys something comparable to the stormtroopers of the Nazi Party of the 1930s. These guys didn't show up in D.C. So will they be moved into action? Will the lone wolf
go ahead? What I remember, a lot of them showed up in D.C. and a lot of them were across the water, waiting on the call to take action.
Okay, they stayed out of the district. They were in Virginia or Maryland or somewhere. Was what you were saying.
Yeah, they were waiting on the sidelines.
Okay, see, I have a question about whether these people think that Donald Trump is the sword they want to fall on, because this is a guy born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He told his people to march on the Capitol, and he would be there to join them, and he didn't. He claims he was held down by the Secret Service, but we didn't see any scars on him. We didn't see and this is a big dude, even though he's in his 70s. I mean, do they think he's the guy that is worth for them showing their hand? So that becomes a question. But I think the other question, the other issue is that, of course, the raw elements have within the raw elements of the white supremacy dynamic, they have what's known as the lone wolves. And these would be the people like Dylan Roof and Peyton Gendron. And so a lot of people have said, that they, are praying for and fearing for, what might happen to Judge Chutkan and District Attorney Willis. I'm more concerned, for example, just say in the Atlanta area, I'm more concerned about what may happen to innocent people of African descent shopping in a market on Joe Lowry Boulevard or Ralph Abernathy Boulevard. I'm more concerned about a repetition of the Tops grocery massacre than, attacking these officials who are doing their jobs. We do know that historically, for the white supremacy dynamic, retaliatory violence is therapeutic. When people who they consider to be inferior do things that they shouldn't be capable of doing, it creates psychological trauma within the white supremacy dynamic. And the therapy for that psychological trauma is retaliatory violence. Even if they initiate the violence, they retaliate. So, that would be a concern. Another concern would be nothing that has happened so far would prevent Donald Trump from being elected president. Donald Trump could be elected president of the United States. He can certainly run, and he can be elected president of the United States as a convicted felon. Now, we're talking about a country where 48 states ban felons from voting. As a matter of fact, if Trump were convicted of a felony in either New York or Georgia before the election in November of 2024, he would not even be allowed to vote for himself in Florida. That is the irony of this. But because there are no constitutional, I mean, in terms of the requirements, other than being 35 years old and a citizen of the United States, so you can be a convicted felon. You can't get a job, maybe as even a forklift driver. You can't vote, but you could be elected president of the United States. What kind of country is this? And they call this the world's greatest democracy. Democracy in the United States, in fact, nowhere in the world that I know of, is based on ethics. I'd rather have a form of government that, like our people had in ancient Kemet. You could call it a monarchy or whatever you want to call it, but it was based on ethics. The so-called democracy of the United States isn't based on ethics. Anything goes.
And let me ask you a question. So
yes,
if Donald Trump is, let's say a scenario, Donald Trump gets convicted, let's say he gets found guilty, let's say he gets sentenced to 20 years in prison for RICO charges in Georgia. Let's say while in prison on election night, Donald Trump is elected the president as he's still serving a sentence for these charges. Would he be able to operate as a president from prison?
The constitutional scholars don't have an answer for that. They because it's unprecedented. They don't know. But okay, so let me just you mentioned this in the opening, but let me just let's make this clear. In terms of the federal charges, the charges that Jack Smith, the special prosecutor appointed by Attorney General Garland, Donald Trump, if elected, could pardon himself. There's nothing to prevent him from pardoning himself for federal crimes. But presidential pardons only apply to federal crimes. Let's say he's elected president, installed in January 2025, and the investigation is still going on. He could order his Justice Department to stop the investigation, and that would be the end of the federal charges. The state charges are different. He has no authority over the state charges. So he would not be able, as you said, to pardon himself. As a matter of fact, the governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, can't pardon him, because some people say, well, Kemp would just pardon him if he got convicted in Georgia. Georgia law doesn't allow the governor to pardon a convicted felon. It has to be done by a special board. I think maybe the Board of Parole or one of those types of organizations within the prison, but you have to serve at least 5 years even before they can pardon you. Now, what option would Trump have? Trump has been elected and he's in prison, somewhere in Georgia. He could declare martial law in Georgia. He could declare martial law in Georgia and free himself, because he said, I can't conduct the business of the presidency in prison, and the only way I can get out of prison is declare martial law in Georgia. All of this is unprecedented, but these are things that could happen. But I think one of the things that we have to look at, particularly from a man whose attitude towards Africa has been that Africa is comprised of SHYT whole countries. He's on record as saying that. He consistently bombed Somalia while he was the president. And so, and because of the the revenge-minded orientation of these psychopathic racial personalities. I think it stands to reason that because 4/5 of the prosecution of Trump, the face of 4/5 of the prosecution of Trump is black, I think there's a good possibility that he would try to seek some type of institutional revenge against the African-American body politic. Now, how much, what could he carry out at the federal level? I don't know, but he certainly in the state houses where, you know, his minions are probably dominant, say in Mississippi and places like that. You know, he could do, for example, to a predominantly black city like Jackson, he could do to cities like that what the Mississippi State Legislature has tried to do in terms of the water supply, you know, disconnecting them from certain access to clean water. So there are all types of things that could happen. The main thing for us, in my opinion, is to stay very vigilant and not get caught up on either side, you know, of this, you know, this corrupt system. I think that's the main thing for us. We need to stay vigilant, you know, be prepared, obviously, for the self-defense, but we can't allow ourselves to get, you know, caught in this trap of, you know, choosing sides between these corrupt parties. So, you know, that's just a few thoughts I have about this, you know, 41 count indictment that's been handed down by Fani Willis in Fulton County, Georgia.
And what I envision, if I could make a prediction on what I think is going to happen, I believe that Donald Trump will eventually beat all of these charges, but it will be so much pressure put upon him on the media from facing these indictments that they'll have all of the ammunition they need to rig the next election and make it believable in the media based upon what they see playing out here. Because if they're strategizing this thing out, I don't see them wanting Trump to get arrested because they know that sparks the war from his constituency. And at the same time, I think they know that the people will be let down easier if they think that he just lost the election fair and square. So I think that he'll probably beat the charges in New York. He'll beat the charges in Georgia, and he'll beat the charges in DC. But then they'll just continue to pound it and pound it and pound it in the media and make people believe that he's lost the popular vote, make people believe that he's lost most of his voters and his followers. And then they can just come in and rig the numbers on the election, and they'll be able to just give it either back to Joe Biden or whoever else they choose to put up there. A lot of people are thinking it's going to be Michelle Obama.
Well, Trump's minions will never believe, you know, the outcome of another election. So, you know, that's something that remains to be seen. I don't see them believing that he will have lost an election fair and square, but
yeah, but they'll roll over quietly like they did on this last one. People look at January 6th, but that was just a situation that was gaslit by the FBI. They had all types of agents out there, provocateurs out there, boosting that thing up. But in reality, millions of Americans rolled over and did nothing. So I think that they know they've tested human behavior. They know that they'll respond the same way versus if Trump is made a martyr or if he's sent to prison. That's what I don't think they're prepared to deal with.
Okay, well, you know, as the Honorable El Hajj Malik El Shabazz said, time will tell.